kind of stuck it out as long as I could. I'm short, so I got like the belly sticking out feeling pretty quickly. Anyway, there's nowhere else for him to go. So when it was getting hard for me to buckle my turnouts, that was a sign for me, like, oh, okay. And also, it's a balance, right? It's a balance of, okay, well, I don't need to let my whole department know my entire story, especially if I lose this kiddo, which would be a very challenging thing. But also I don't want to go on a homeless campfire with burning tires and then negatively affect my baby in utero, right? So my captain was rad about kind of keeping me out of harm's way if he could. Otherwise, I was wearing my CBA on fires. I felt very strong still, but again, the hunger was a real thing. I felt that sickness when I wasn't eating enough carbs. Anyway, slowly but surely figured it out. I went off duty off of my rig about 10 weeks, open arms with the female deputy chief who had a hard time. She made sure that I was treated very fairly and equitably. My personal experience, and I'll be diplomatic, I had a hard time with a few individuals. I think it was a hard time for me personally because up until that point, I had been one of the guys, right? We hung out socially. I was the only gal online. Like I said, the other woman was a chief, so she worked for us, but she wasn't on a rig. So one of the guys, and I was in my early 30s or mid 30s, excuse me, at that point, and I think that most people were very understanding as much as they could be, having never gone through it physically. I work with mostly men, but they tried, right? And any sort of hiccup, I was able to say, hey, this would be more, best for me. With wearing maternity clothes, or, they were leaning on me a lot, and I think that was lovely of them, and it just speaks to our small department not having seen a lot of pregnant women come through. But yeah, I feel like it was a good experience for sure. So
it's beautiful.
Thanks.
And so, how about you, Katy?
I think after getting pregnant, and my wife and I were actually trying to get on the same shift, just because imagining our family, we wanted to be, work 2 days on the same shift and then go off for a big enough department where we don't necessarily work together. I bid a water rescue house with this company officer I knew well, but not incredibly well. So I was keeping my pregnancy to myself because I just really wanted to make my name for myself before I ended up going off and make sure that it's not, I have a lot of pride. I've taken a lot of time to build myself in this career and in this industry. And I think that we have this misconception where if we get pregnant, then you're lesser than. And so I got into the company. My wife got her bid to 23, which is a fantastic station, which Nadja works at now. I really had a rough pregnancy. I was sick all the time. They provided me Zofran. I threw up every day. So I think my captain just thought I was just sick all the time. And I just didn't show. I didn't show really until 4 or 5 months. And we were going down the tower a lot. And so I was we were having a little bit of issues with the pregnancy. Like you spoke to, little guy sticking around. Like we were just unsure. And I think there's just so many feelings and emotions that tie into it. And then when you inject the fire service, people have opinions. And then they speak from their own experience, not making that space for you and that you're in it and that you're the one it is. I had a great crew. I just wasn't there yet where I wanted to share my entire world with them. It was, I think, 4 or 5 months in, I finally started, my pants were getting a little tighter, and I actually go down the tower. We had a structure fire. And I was like, hey guys, I think the structure fire went great. My captain, they're all excited. And I was like, I just got to tell you guys, great job. But I got to tell you something serious. And they both just look at me and they're just like, is she bidding out? What's going on? I was like, I'm pregnant. And they were the happiest. They were just the big brothers. They were just happy. And Matt's like, I was wondering, I thought you were getting fat. I thought we were going to have to talk to you about drinking. I thought I was going to have completely different conversations. And I'm like, thanks, Maddie. He's like, this is so great. My firefighter at the time, he is like the nicest guy. And he's definitely one of those. His name's Hermanson. We call him Big Herm. He's like, Herm works out, he's a big Raiders fan, and he's just like, all right, dope, I'm gonna have a little guide around here. I'm like, he's not coming to work, Evan. Like, but it's like, it was that moment of like, you build something up in your head so much and you have so much negative, like just, I think the emotions just start to kind of like, you make your own story up a lot in any industry. And I just had the most warm reception and the two biggest teammates, and it made me not want to go off because I didn't want to go into an office every day. And I stayed online until 6 months. I was able to do my job as engineer, and I was probably fitter when I was pregnant than I was. I mean, I'm throwing up all the time. But right. my wife told her captain, and Aaron Lee is fantastic. He's like, he gave me a set of his clothes, and it was like very, kind of helped me out a lot. And then I would come down the tower to help train, and I was pregnant doing all this stuff. And it's like, for me, it felt fine. And for me, that's where I was at. And I think when we create policies and things, we have to think about the person. Everyone's pregnancy is different. For me, I was sick. I was struggling with prepartum and postpartum depression, something that I was, since I was in the thick of it, I didn't see it. Mm-hmm. But I would go to work, and not that I would go home to anyone unsupportive, but like my work life, like I have so much value, and I value those men's opinion of me, and they gave me so much support, and I just didn't want to stop that. And I didn't want to be out of that. And so that was the hard pull for me. And we have light duty assignments. I went in the office. Admin was great. I got, looking back on it now, the position I'm sitting in, I'm training captain. I had so much access to chief officers, and I was doing a lot of things for them. Mm-hmm. It really helped build me and give me access to things that people don't take advantage of everything. Like if they're gonna give you a light duty assignment, ask for a cool light duty assignment with a cool chief that wants to teach you cool stuff. Yes. Don't just like drudge through this. So my pregnancy is like, it was very different. Like I stayed, I worked out to the day I delivered. I worked till the day I delivered. And at points I was like, well, this might not be the best, but it's like, you don't know. Like if I would have stopped working out, I think that would have been negative on me. That was my happy place. Even just going to the gym and trying to touch my toes, like. And I think when we create policies, we want to protect people and give them opportunity and options. And we want to make sure what it's best, but also not paint other people into corners as well. Right. So just being very mindful. But I had a rock star crew, and so I couldn't have been more, thankful to them during that time.
It is true. Like I've worked with our women's group for years, and people's comfort level of when to come out off the line, it's a big question. Mm-hmm. And if you're just getting into this job, it's probably not something you're thinking about, but it should be, because if you want to have children, it is something to look at. If does a department have a family planning policy? Mm-hmm. Is it a good family planning policy? Talk to some of the people, men and women, in there. The real big thing to me with this policy stuff is that the choice of when to come off the line is still stays with the firefighter, the pregnant firefighter. We want to keep that choice, but there is also questions of, fit for duty. Like, am I fit for duty? And that's where that goes. And my story of when I got pregnant it was different from yours. I wasn't trying to get pregnant. I didn't even know I was until literally I was walking down the stairs of our firehouse worked at Station 7, 17 people, one of our biggest firehouses. We have big meals and big, and around 5 o'clock when the cook's starting to go, and the smell of garlic and onions frying, which is like the best smell in the world.
Yes, it is.
Made my stomach turn and made me want to puke. And I was like, oh my God, why does that smell so bad? And I was like, oh no, what is, and then I was, I still didn't think about it, but then I was exhausted, and that's when I found out, I went and got a test, and we found out we were pregnant, and I was like, oh my God. And that was really a hard decision. Like for me, okay, this wasn't something I put into my plan. It's happened. We decided we're going to do this. I was 34. I was 35 by the time my son was born, so I was, high risk, but really entrenched at the station I was at. Same, like working hard. It's a very busy station, and that decision of when to come off the line was really a difficult one. Yes. And so I think that is, again, for new people, it's not something you're thinking of. But for me, I wasn't a boss at that time. I was in 2005. I didn't promote till a couple years later. And I remember I was probably like 8 or 9 weeks. And I wasn't showing, I just was nauseous. I was nauseous from that day walking down the firehouse until like month 5, I think. I woke up one morning, I wasn't. I was like, oh my God, I'm never gonna forget this moment. Never gonna forget this. Because I was nauseous the whole time. The moment that I realized I needed to come out of out of the firehouse was we had a box. And box, for those of you who don't know, it's like, and that's what we call it in San Francisco, where it comes over the thing and it may, the potential for a working fire. And so you move a little bit faster, we're getting all our stuff, we're getting in the back. And I'm sitting in the back, I'm getting all my gear on, and I had this sinking feeling, going, please don't be a fire, please don't be a fire. And I'd never had that thought. And I was like, and then a watch or so later, I might have been a car fire, but it hadn't started yet. He's sitting in there and I'm holding C-spine as we're figuring out what's going on, and all this smoke is pouring out, and I'm like, doing this. Yes, I should have had a SCB on, but we didn't, it wasn't a full on. And I just, those two things added, I was like, I'm not in this, like, wait. And so I do think it is such a personal, like, however you get to that decision. And what I've tried to do post now, that is when I find out people are pregnant, or they come, or they decide to go temporary modified duty, is what we call it, light duty, to call them and just say how's, or if I hear earlier, like, I didn't talk to anyone either, like, I didn't want anyone to know, I didn't want, like, I was very private and still am, but that's a really heavy and hard decision, and it's an individual decision.
If it gets out earlier than you want it to, does that cause
So, like, yeah, a lot goes on that first trimester, and do I want, but it's you make that choice of what's best for you and your family, where, like, it's your choice.
Right,
but just know what's happening, know what you're exposed to, or what the potential, what you're exposed to, and go from there.
For me, like, I was very private about it, and having someone who works in it, and fortunately, for the most part, people were respectful of it. A couple people kind of came up and asked my captain, and he's like, well, what's your medical record? What, are we talking about your private, this is her private medical, whatever it is. So let me see what your private medical is. And I think that we don't equate that enough of, like, this is someone's private medical decisions. Are we talking about your vasectomy? Are we talking about, like, we've had guys who've gotten vasectomies and come back to work the next day. Should they be at work? You know, like, that's their decision. Maybe they should be, I don't know. And then unfortunately, you're talking about someone's life, and that's kind of like their decision.
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
Did you come back between your pregnancy? Well, let's hear your story. I'm just curious if you stayed off or if you...
So I was I'm going to talk about the first pregnancy, and I'll make the second pregnancy short too. Try to shorten it. First pregnancy, like I said earlier, it was like during COVID. I was at a slower station in Castro Valley. And then I was deciding where I was going to go because there's a promotional exam coming up, and I was like, oh, I could go to this station, and we call it the Flats, and where you run more busier calls, and like you guys all attested to, like, being respected, being one of the guys, trying to fit in. You guys hit all the points, and I'll make my story short because you guys hit everything. I was at Station 7. I was trying to figure out where I was going to go. I was also in the midst of trying to buy a house and all those things, and just moved in with my partner, trying to figure out how that's gonna go, but it was going good, and like, okay, where are we at? And then found out I was pregnant. I was at a slower station, and I didn't know I was pregnant because I was so stressed out with the house and COVID and all kind of stuff, right? And I had our oldest living with us, my partner's son. Come to find out, I was just like, something's off. We're on a call, and we were at a house that was cooking rice, and then they were cooking curry. Just all the different smells. We had a code word. I had told my crew, who was really close to that, and I said the same thing that you guys all said, like, don't tell anybody. Like, this is my first kid. I had just found out I was pregnant, like, and then it really sunk in when I smelt all these smells, and I had a code word, like, hey, I'm gonna decon. And if you don't know what decon means, it's decontaminating all the germs that we touch going in and out the house, or any blood pathogens, anything. So I was like, hey, I'm out, I'm going to decon, okay? But mind you, the patient was good, they were alert, we're waiting for the ambulance. So perfect timing, go out, and I was just like nauseous, and I was like, how am I going to do this? You know, and I was also training for our acting engineer's binder, which allows me to act up, and I was almost done with that binder. I volunteered for like a panel thing, and for interview panel, very active in our department, doing stuff like that. And then I called a couple of my sisters, Katy and a few others, and I was like, hey, I'm pregnant, but I want to go to a busier station. How am I going to do this? And then lo and behold, I ended up at Station 23 with with her wife, who's captain, is my captain now, very supportive, very understanding. And I said, hey, I really desire to be at the station. However, I just want to let you know that I'm pregnant. I'm only, I was hitting that 16 weeks, and I was like, are you guys okay with it? Talk to the crew. If I do end up, being a part of your crew, are you guys okay with that? I'm like, oh yeah, we could work with anybody, we're good, blah, blah, blah. Then I had other people saying like, you're crazy, you're gonna go to the flats, you're better off staying here, but this was my only chance of getting out of a slower station. Mind you, slower stations are great for whatever you wanna do, whatever your heart desires, but I needed the more experience, hence why I wanted to get to a busier house. And once you become a firefighter, you'll understand, and these will all come together. I just wanted to fit in, like you guys all said. So anyways, worked all the way through to 7 months. I'm gonna speed it up. Worked all the way through up till about 7 months. It was during COVID, but we all had that conversation. If there's a fire, I could upgrade as an engineer, but I did run a few fire calls, and I think my turning point was the fire that was out in San Leandro Hills, and all the guys were like, what are you doing? All my brothers were like, hey, what are you doing? Get back. Because I started showing. And it just became a turning point when I was waking up and I was uncomfortable. I wasn't getting enough rest. And I started thinking about the baby. I talked to the doctors. I was healthy. Everybody was on board and supportive, even my battalion chief. But it just came to that point where my PPE wasn't fitting properly, and that's important in the fire service to make sure that's fitting. If not, OSHA and all that stuff is going to come down. So when that came about where I couldn't properly fit my PPE, and as you said, I was slower to come, the adrenaline wasn't rolling to save someone's house, that was the determining factor, like it's time to go. However, like I said before, I did talk to other women in the fire service. Everyone's pregnancy is different. Some go out sooner than others. It's up to your crew, your family, my family away from home. And I did talk to my partner, and I was like, hey, the doctor said this, how do you feel about that? It was more important to him, right? Because I'm carrying a child. And then also it was important to me and what I put into my body, because I'm also feeding and growing a human. So those are all contributing factors, but I don't know if it's the type of drive that you all said that we have in us. I just didn't want to leave my environment. I didn't want to leave my crew. I felt like I was gonna miss something, like, oh, the community's gonna need me, they're gonna miss me. And then in hindsight, I had to think about my health and my child that I'm carrying. Would I lose it? Would I do this? Would I do that? Am I being safe? How am I being to my crew? And my other crew members that come along to attach for certain calls, like, how am I gonna help them if I could barely breathe or help myself? But I did go to car fires, I did go to house fires and all that. But like I said, like Katy attests to, and you guys all did, we just had supportive crews and supportive people in our department, which helped make it easier. And I felt like they were more excited about us being pregnant than we were. Not saying I wasn't excited, but it was just amazing. Like, because of our job, great. Right? Yeah. So I did stay on till 7 months, and I know it's kind of crazy. And then I had those people that were like, if you're my wife, and I was like, well, I'm not, I wouldn't do that. But to each their own. I would say, take the advice of a doctor, your partner, your family, and listen to your body. Yes. To second pregnancy, it was harder. I was a little older.
Did you stay off, or did you stay?
I stayed on.
Oh, so second pregnancy.
So you came back. She's asking if you came back. Okay, I only took 3 months off. Okay. And then I split my time because of childcare and stuff like that. And then I ended up pregnant. My child was 11 months, and I found out I was pregnant. I knew I was actually more sick. I was throwing up and yakking, and I was like, oh man, I'm pregnant again. Again, like, I'm not saying it as a disappointment. I was just like, I just felt like myself. I finally felt back to my normal self. I felt like I was moving good. I was stronger. I was, better. I was there. I was present at work. I was, moving. I had everything signed off for my engineer. And then second pregnancy came about. I was like, wow, this pregnancy is going to be harder. What am I going to do this time? So those things started processing, and this time the light went off quicker. And And I was like, wow, this might be more difficult than before, so maybe I should take off sooner. So I did at 5 months, because I was like, wow, what if I lose it, because of the the bleeding and the physical, and we were having more fires that year.
Yeah, that was a busy year.
It was a really busy year, and we had just came out of, it was still post-COVID going into like back to normal, if whatever we call normalcy at that time. So it was really hard, and those are times when I had to wake up and put my pride aside and my ego, like, hey, you need to wake up and be there for your kids, and be there for your crew, be there for your partner, you know, and your kids that are already here, and just stop, and the job's gonna be here.
Exactly what I was
So
thinking.
that was my
Work will
second
always be
turning
there.
point. So it was pushing 5 months, but it was finally like, hey, and everyone's like, hey, you know, that's not good, you know, but thank goodness to the women and men in our department, they're really supportive, and I got a good position both times working light duty, and it was actually a blessing in disguise, meeting more of our admin staff, meeting more like dispatchers, all the key people that help run a fire department. It's not just the firefighters. It's, you know, as you go up the ladder, and who knows, maybe I'll be sitting them with one day. But we've had awesome chiefs, male and female, that help kind of like, maybe, I don't know, I learned a lot from them, and coming from a corporate background, I actually helped some of them, and we helped each other. So, you know, I turned those back on. So, you know, your whole life story, no matter how old or how young you are, or when you're turning point in your career, all these skill sets come back into the fire service.
Yeah.